January 2023, I traveled to Ecuador, a country shaped by fire, ice and altitude. The Andean nation is crossed by the Avenue of the Volcanoes, a chain of giants stretching through the heart of the Andes. My goal was Chimborazo. Everest may be the highest mountain above sea level, but Chimborazo reaches farther from the center of the earth than any other point on the planet. To prepare for the altitude, I started with acclimatization climbs. Illiniza Norte, its glaciated and technical twin Illiniza Sur, and Antisana, a remote volcano surrounded by an almost unreal labyrinth of ice. This film is a journey through Ecuador's Avenue of the Volcanoes, one of the most beautiful landscapes I've ever explored. After arriving in Quito, the capital, I made my way to Latacunga, where I met my local guide and completed the final preparations before setting out for the first goal. As an introduction to the adventure ahead, we set out to climb the extinct Illiniza volcano. Its northern summit, though rugged, requires only light rock climbing, while the slightly higher southern summit is glaciated in its upper sections and offers an exciting technical climb. We had planned 2 days for the mountain. On the first day, we set out from Latacunga, followed the Panamericana north, and began the ascent at the base of the volcano, aiming for the northern summit as our goal for the day. The following day, our plan was to climb the main southern summit. Starting just below 4,000 meters, the trail wound through serene green landscapes, gradually giving the way to the harsh volcanic terrain above. A transformation accentuated by the misty weather, which thankfully stayed with us only on our first day in the mountains. Eventually we arrived at the Refugio Nuevos Horizontes, our base for the night. There we paused only for a quick lunch before setting off toward Illiniza Norte. After gaining roughly 200 meters more on the surreal yellow volcanic rock, the cloud cover lifted and we were able to take in our first view of Illiniza Sur, towering above 5,200 meters. Though in the shadow of the giants like Chimborazo, Cotopaxi, Antisana and Cayambe, its freshly snow-covered slopes now appeared impressively imposing, raising our anticipation and respect for the climb the next day. But at first our focus remained on the northern summit, whose ascent had now become steeper and demanded our full attention. And so, at 5,126 meters and once again enveloped in thick mist, we reached the first summit of our adventure. The thin air up here was certainly challenging after only a few days at high altitude, yet I felt happy and confident about the mountain still to come. After a short time at the top, we started our descent back to the hut. Looking up at the southern summit now, I recalled the 2008 crash of a Boeing 737 during its approach to Latacunga. Since it was a maintenance flight, there were no passengers on board and only 3 crew members lost their lives. It was still a reminder that these mountains demand respect. Nevertheless, my attention was already on the climb ahead. As we descended, the clouds began to clear, promising good conditions for the next day. The southern summit of Illiniza is a different mountain altogether. Only slightly higher, but characterized by a steep glacier that demands proper mountaineering. The fresh snow added difficulty, but rewarded us with an extraordinary view. We left the hut in the darkness of the night beneath a star-filled sky, untouched by the light pollution of distant cities. Following the snow-covered trail, we made our way toward the crampon point, where the real climbing would begin. At this point, we still didn't know whether the snow condition would allow an ascent due to the avalanche risk. Still, our plan was to reach the glacier first and assess the situation from there. Luckily, the snow condition permitted us to push higher. The glacier was steep, but secured with our ice screws, we continued upward and rewarded by the breathtaking color of the morning light, which cast a warm glow over the northern summit. One of the most famous stories told by climbers and locals is that the 2 peaks were once humans. A young man and a young woman from rival villages who fell in love. The man's father, angry about their love, hired a sorcerer who transformed the girl into Illiniza Norte, the northern summit. Heartbroken, the young man searched for her and finally asked the same sorcerer to turn him into Illiniza Sur, so that they could remain together forever. Eventually, we arrived at the final steep stretch, winding up toward the summit ridge. The first sunlight illuminated the edge, hinting at the breathtaking panorama that awaited above. With this in mind, we pushed on through the last meters. At the ridge below the summit, the view took our breath away and left us speechless. The summit now lay before us, so we tore our eyes away from the breathtaking panorama and pushed on through the final meters to the top. From up here, the avenue of the volcanoes stretched out before us. To the northeast, the 5,790-meter-high Cayambe appeared in the distance, while slightly further east, Antisana with its massive glacier rose to 5,753 meters, my favorite volcano of the whole trip. And directly ahead, Cotopaxi dominated the view, its crater sending pulsating ash clouds into the sky. And to the south, the king of Ecuadorian volcanoes, Chimborazo, towered above 6,260 meters, completing the breathtaking panorama. With these impressions in our minds, we began the steep and technical descent back to the hut. Aside from the breathtaking views, these 2 days had given us an excellent first acclimatization. 2 summits above 5,000 meters and a night spent around 4,700 meters, preparing us well for the higher mountains still to come. Before attempting the next volcano, I was determined to visit Cotopaxi National Park, even though climbing the mountain wasn't possible. Since October 2022, Cotopaxi had been in an active phase with seismic tremors, gas emissions and ash plumes. This is not unusual. Over the past 100 years, Cotopaxi has erupted several times, sometimes explosively. Its massive glaciers make it particularly dangerous as lahars, fast-moving mud and debris flows, can form and sweep down its slopes. As a result, climbing was prohibited from 2022 until 2024. But even from its base, the volcano looked threatening and at the same time majestically beautiful. Well rested and full of motivation, the next adventure awaited, the ascent of Antisana, the fourth highest mountain in the country. In my opinion, it offered the most beautiful climb, winding through a labyrinth of crevasses and seracs. Antisana is more remote than the other volcanoes, so we set out again from Latacunga, following the Panamericana north, before turning east into the high plains of Antisana National Park. The park is largely untouched and almost completely free of humans, making it home to some very rare wildlife, including spectacled bears, cougars and mountain tapirs. We were fortunate enough to spot Andean deers and even a massive condor along the way. Arriving at the base of the mountain, just before a looming moraine, we set up our camp, prepared our meals and carried out a few final preparations, such as practicing crevasses rescue techniques. For the rest of the day, we simply enjoyed the landscape of this remote and lonely region. Antisana's last recorded eruption dates back to the early 1800s, and since then the volcano has remained quiet. The first documented ascent of the summit was made in 1965 by American and Ecuadorian climbers, much later than many of Ecuador's other great peaks. Due to its steep crevasse glacier and technical nature, Antisana sees far fewer ascents than Cotopaxi or Chimborazo, and with the glacier constantly moving, the route can change each time, making every climb unique and unpredictable. We set off in the middle of the night, first crossing the vast moraine fields toward the base of the huge glacier that wrapped around the volcano. There, we put on our crampons and began the ascent, roped up in teams of 2. The climb was cold and steep. Choosing the right line through the glacier required constant attention, yet we moved upward steadily. What awaited us at dawn made it clear why I had called the ascent of Antisana the most beautiful experience of the trip. Beneath us, the immense glacier labyrinth we had already crossed began to take shape. Looking south, the vast Andean highlands stretched out before us, timeless and untouched. No people, no civilization, only the great volcanoes rising on the horizon. I kept looking back, Illiniza to the right, Chimborazo in the distance to the left, and in between Cotopaxi, wrapped in the morning light with ash clouds rising from its crater. To my surprise, far to the south, another active volcano came into view, the 5,280 meter high Sangay. With the sun now rising on the other side of the mountain, we could already make out the wide summit plateau above us, even though we still had to navigate an icefall section riddled with deep crevasses and towering seracs. Finding the right line wasn't always easy, making this part a kind of bottleneck in the ascent, but still it was incredibly impressive. After a while and after occasionally heading in the wrong direction, we finally reached the top of the icefall. One last steep section still awaited us before we could make it to the lower part of the summit plateau. The air was noticeably thin by now, but the incredible scenery gave us all the energy we needed for the final meters. As for the view from up here, I don't think I need to say anything. Just take a look at the active Cotopaxi for yourself. Around 8 o'clock in the morning we reached the highest point of the mountain, a moment worth celebrating, especially knowing how lucky we were that day. Ascents under such conditions are rare and often the mountain cannot be climbed at all. From up here the entire avenue of the volcanoes unfolded beneath us, revealing one by one the great giants of Ecuador, rising from the landscape in every direction. Far to the south, Sangay and El Altar appeared on the horizon. Directly ahead stood the active Cotopaxi. To the south as well, Chimborazo came into view, the closest point on Earth to the sun. Slightly farther west rose the twin summits of Illiniza. And to the north, Cayambe emerged on the skyline. And looking east, the landscape dropped away into the endless vastness of the Amazon basin. But a long descent still lay ahead, so we didn't stay on the summit for long. The route wound back through the labyrinth of crevasses and seracs, now under the strengthening equatorial sun. As the ice warmed, seracs could collapse and the risk of avalanches increased. So we couldn't afford to lose time, yet had to remain constantly focused, carefully monitoring this beautiful route. Back in Latacunga, 2 days of rest lay ahead. I made good use of that time with a night at the Quilotoa Caldera, the westernmost volcano in the country. At nearly 4,000 meters overlooking the crater lake formed by a massive 13th century eruption whose lavas and pyroclastic flows reached all the way to the Pacific. I was able to further refine my acclimatization before the final and highest volcano awaited. On the 3rd day we set out toward Chimborazo. There was already plenty to see along the way, beside the Tungurahua volcano and Chimborazo itself, which was visible on the horizon from afar. We also encountered a traditional street parade. Chimborazo, once considered the highest mountain in the world before the Himalayas were measured, wasn't entirely wrong. After all, it's the peak farthest from the center of the earth, and at 6,263 meters, after Denali, the northernmost 6,000 meter mountain in the Americas. Even from a distance, it appears as a massive block of volcanic rock and thick ice, undeniably the most striking sight in all of Ecuador. Chimborazo was famously studied by Alexander von Humboldt in the early 19th century, who carefully observed its glaciers and volcanic slopes during his explorations. The first recorded ascent of Chimborazo was made later, in 1880. We started at around 4,800 meters at the Refugio Carrel on the southwest side of the mountain. On the first day, our goal was simply to reach the high camp about 500 meters higher, where we could rest well before setting out for the summit in the middle of the night the following day. The route was again rugged, dominated by volcanic rock, but after a short while it gave way to a vast expanse of deep snow. Once we reached the high camp, we settled into our tent, ate, and prepared our gear for the night ascent. We took a moment to enjoy the quiet of the mountains, but also study tomorrow's route, able to see large parts of it in the snow. At the same time, the deep snow concerned us, as the conditions of the past weeks had increased the avalanche risk. Tomorrow would reveal whether it would be safe to attempt the summit. Once again, we started in the darkness of the night after a quick breakfast and some hot tea. The climb would be less technical than those on Illiniza Sur or Antisana, but the roughly 1,000 meters of elevation ahead would still make it a serious challenge. After a few initial easy rock sections, we reached the actual glacier after an hour. From there, the route climbed steeply for several hundred meters toward the summit plateau. Despite a certain residual avalanche risk, we decided to push on toward the summit. And after 5 hours we reached the lower part of the summit plateau. Up here it was calm but extremely cold, something I felt most in my very cold feet. I hadn't mentioned before that when I arrived in Quito my luggage hadn't made it onto the plane. The shoes I had to borrow were unfortunately not warm enough, and I discovered mild frostbites on my big toe after the climb. But I gladly accepted that for the view waiting for us on the highest point, the summit of what is, by some definition, the tallest mountain in the world. For the third time we were rewarded with a breathtaking view over Ecuador's volcanoes. To the southeast, Tungurahua, El Altar and the active Sangay came into view again. And to the north rose the impressive giants, the twin peaks of Illiniza, Cotopaxi, Cayambe and Antisana.
Chimborazo Rey, excelente cumbre, un clima espectacular, la nieve un poco floja pero se pudo lograr, cumbre máxima del Chimborazo Rey. Saludos.
We took one last look at the panorama before beginning the long descent back to the high camp and later down to the base of the mountain. Two and a half weeks in Ecuador were an unforgettable experience. I was overwhelmed by the beauty of the country, especially the volcanoes as they snake along the western cordillera of the Andes, each one more striking than the last. At the same time, I felt deeply grateful for the incredible luck we had with the weather, enjoying perfect panoramas from the small but technically challenging Illiniza Sur, the magical glacier paradise of Antisana, and Chimborazo, the mighty king of the Ecuadorian volcanoes.